In the morning, Harper awoke to warm kisses on his cheek. His wife, Evelyn, sat beside him in bed and smiled gently. "Good morning," she greeted him softly. "You sleep so peacefully." Harper stretched in bed and pulled Evelyn to him. It was going to be a busy day. He had to take his wife to the train station, go to work, and meet up with friends in the evening. "Remind me when you'll be back," inquired Harper. "In 3 days. We have a work meeting today and a conference tomorrow," Evelyn replied as she finished packing for the road. Even though it was only a short trip to a neighboring town, her suitcase was stuffed to the brim with clothes and shoes. Saying goodbye was always hard for both of them. "I'll miss you," Evelyn whispered, hugging him from behind and nuzzling her nose against his neck. They said their goodbyes, and now it was time to head to work. In the meantime, Evelyn's phone was flooded with messages and pictures from the trip. The hotel room, the view from the window, the pictures from lunch with her coworkers. Harper was kept up to date on every detail of her whereabouts, from the lunch location to the conference venue. As Harper headed out to meet with friends, his phone made a short beep, signaling a new message. Evelyn texted that she had arrived at the hotel and was feeling very tired. She decided to go to bed and turned off her phone. He replied to her with a gentle message wishing her a good night and put the phone in his pocket. As Harper approached the entrance to the bar, he was greeted by his friends, Liam, Mason, and Michael. They exchanged handshakes and greetings. Michael jokingly asked if Harper was finally free of his commitment, which elicited laughter from everyone present. Unlike Harper, not all the guys had that kind of freedom. Seated at a table at the bar, they'd ordered their drinks. Liam playfully chided Harper for taking so long to return his calls and for his sad expression. Harper admitted that he couldn't help but miss Evelyn. He even suggested a spontaneous weekend trip to visit her in another city. The friends exchanged glances and sighed amicably as they commented on Harper's boring behavior. After another 15 minutes of sitting around without touching his beer, Harper made the decision to surprise Evelyn by going to her town. He said goodbye to his friends and caught a cab to his house, where he parked the car. Overwhelmed by his bold decision, he got behind the wheel and enthusiastically drove towards his wife. 200 kilometers separated Harper from Evelyn. At first he drove on an empty highway, but as he approached the city, Harper slowed down and relied on the navigator. The navigator prompted, beeped there, and gave the address of the hotel where his wife was staying. Harper followed the directions and turned left. Endpoint in 20 meters, the navigator announced in a robotic female voice. Harper found himself in front of a luxury hotel in the center of the city. He was greeted by a young woman behind the receptionist's desk. "Good evening. What can I do for you?" she asked with a smile. Her name tag read Faith. "Hello, Faith. I'm here to surprise my wife. She's staying in room 278, Harper informed her. "Could you please give me your spouse's first and last name for verification?" asked Faith politely, still smiling. Harper gave her full name, and the receptionist began to look up the information on the computer. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. No one at our hotel is registered under that name. I apologize for the possible confusion," Faith reported sympathetically. Harper felt his face lose color, and the room seemed to spin. Grasping the counter, he asked, "Are you sure no one is registered? Please check the other last names as well." He then called out 3 more names of colleagues who were scheduled to attend the same conference. "I'm sorry, but there's no registration under those names either," Faith confirmed, her eyes full of sympathy. Feeling uncertain, Harper walked out of the hotel and leaned against the railing outside, inhaling deeply of the cool night air. Somewhere nearby, a nightclub was playing softly, dwarfing the neighborhood with its music. Harper dialed Evelyn's number several times, hoping for an answer, but all he got in response were beeps and voicemails. Not knowing what to do next, he pondered whether to go home and wait. Evelyn would be back in 3 days, and Harper planned to meet with her, tell her about the situation, and demand an explanation. Suddenly, he remembered an incident from a couple of years ago when he had installed a tracking program on Evelyn's new phone. Back then, it was a precautionary measure in case the device was lost or stolen. Despite the cold weather, Harper got in his car and logged into the tracking app on his phone. After a long load time, he selected the desired icon, which resulted in a beacon and address appearing on the screen. The address belonged to a nightclub. Impulsively throwing the money on the counter, Harper caught the attention of the receptionist and swiftly walked inside the establishment. Surrounded by a lively dancing crowd, he looked around the room, but none of the faces looked familiar. Intoxicated young men and women occupied the bar and its surroundings, reveling in their intoxication. The pulsing music caused Harper's emotions to surge, leading him to believe for a moment that one of the girls sitting on the bar was his wife, Evelyn. Determined to find Evelyn, Harper headed through the noisy crowd to where he thought she was sitting. He finally spotted her. She was wearing a brightly colored dress with one strapless strap slipping off her slender shoulder. Evelyn sat defiantly on the counter, spreading her legs as far apart as the dress would allow. A man unfamiliar to his wife took the seat next to her, and she giggled. He gently stroked her thighs, his gaze full of desire. The woman leaned closer to him, and they shared a passionate kiss that seemed to last forever in her husband's eyes. Suddenly, she pulled away and noticed her husband standing next to her. Hastily cleaning herself up, she swiftly left her seat and approached him. Her face reflected a mixture of emotions and tears came to her eyes. "Harper," she muttered, but her voice was drowned out by the surrounding noise. Evelyn covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Harper stared at her in bewilderment, unable to realize that just this morning he had happily accompanied her to meet her lover. Evelyn reached out desperately, trying to touch him. Harper recoiled at first, but then gave in and grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. His cry was lost amidst the commotion. Without waiting for a response, he turned away and walked away. The echoes of the overwhelming emotions and loud music still echoed in his ears. He needed to get home. Driving out of town, Harper pressed down on the gas pedal, turning up the music and letting his thoughts consume him. He couldn't understand how his beloved wife, his precious Evelyn, had betrayed him so easily. The next morning, Harper packed up all of Evelyn's things. He gathered all the gifts they had exchanged, all the things they had bought together for their home, and even the books she liked to read in the evenings after work. They were stacked in a large box labeled junk. As he descended the stairs and opened the front door, the first thing that caught his eye was his wife. A car was parked a short distance away. In the driver's seat sat the man from the club. He was the one who had pulled her against him and kissed her passionately tonight. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. She clutched her purse tightly, noticing there was no box in Harper's hands. Finally, "Why don't you take your trash and leave?" Harper spat, tossing the box to the ground next to Evelyn's feet. The contents scattered across the pavement, including lacy lingerie that fell at Evelyn's feet. She hastily gathered up her belongings and Harper, still feeling the newfound lightness, walked back home. The weight off his shoulders made him feel considerably lighter. Without wasting any time, his ex-wife began to settle into her new rental apartment with her lover, Mason, that same day. She was in no hurry to get married for fear it would scare him away. They lived together for about 6 months, but as time went on, Mason began to treat Evelyn like a maid, constantly demanding that she wait on him, bring him things, and do his laundry. There was no gratitude or kind words in return. Desperate to recreate the warmth she had felt in her previous marriage, she realized that Mason had become completely different. He only wanted to take, giving nothing in return. Over time, he began to physically abuse her, forcing Evelyn to hide her bruises from others. Friends and acquaintances, influenced by Harper's stories, turned their backs on her. She didn't want them to know what she had willingly given up her once happy marriage for. After another heated argument, Evelyn ended up in the hospital. By then, her parents had already intervened and took their daughter in. During rehabilitation, she cried for a long time, finally coming to the realization that she had made one of the biggest mistakes of her life.